the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se
Today's meeting will take place in a hybrid format. Members will be present in person or on Zoom.
And in light of the recommendations from health authorities to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person should follow the directives of the Board of Internal Economy. Je remercie d'avance les membres.
Thanks in advance to all the members for their cooperation. I'd like to remind you that when you speak, please do so slowly and clearly. For those of you who are participating virtually, when you are not speaking, please turn off your microphone.
Cool. Challenges arise. Please advise me immediately. Please know that we may need to suspend just a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Donc, conformément.
So pursuant to Article 1083F and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of Francophone immigration to Canada and Quebec. I would also like now to welcome our witnesses. Welcome to Anne-Michèle Meix, former Director of Planning and Accountability at the Ministère de l'Immigration et de la Francisation et de l'Intégration at the Government of Quebec. And welcome for a first time to Bernard Tremblay, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Fédération des Cégeps. Ladies and gentlemen, the way this works is that you will have 5 minutes for opening remarks. Following this, there will be a series of questions that will be posed to you by each member of the committee. That being said, Mrs. Meix, you have the floor first for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me for this essential matter, which is French immigration. Why is it critical? Because the number of people who use a language in their daily lives determines its vitality and sustainability. For French, this number is going down both in Quebec and in the rest of Canada. Let's be clear, if the survival of French in Quebec is not assured, the survival of French outside of Quebec is illusory. What factors influence the adoption of French in the daily life of allophone immigrants? A study commissioned by the Office québécois de la langue française, published in 2013, analyzed the entire linguistic journey of an allophone immigrant from birth and country of origin to sometime after their arrival in the country, and even up to the second generation. The results are very clear. Among allophone adults, using French at home is associated with much more frequent use of French in the public space compared to when it's not spoken at home. This process is called language transfer. The younger people are when they arrive, the more linguistic transfers there are. 62% of those who transferred to French did so before arriving in Canada, while 38% did it after. Transfers made after arrival occurred quickly, half of them within the first 5 years. Another important factor is the country of origin. 76% of allophones from Francotropic countries use French in their daily lives. For those from Anglotropic countries, it's barely 25%. Finally, school attendance in French is associated with daily use of this language. This observation applies to primary, secondary, and post-secondary education. However, it should be noted that 3/4 of permanent immigrants to Quebec and almost 100% of temporary immigrants are adults. The vast majority of immigrants have therefore completed their studies before arriving. These observations argue in favor of measures to welcome as much as possible immigrants who have already chosen French before arriving. Young people from Francotropic countries who have completed their studies in French, who already speak French at home. For people who do not yet speak French in their daily lives, it is critical that those of school age study in French. The Francization of adults must be done as quickly as possible. It's already difficult in Quebec. It's almost unimaginable outside of Quebec. At least 1/3 of permanent immigration is in the family and humanitarian category. No language requirements exist in these categories. We must therefore rely on economic immigration. However, the majority of people admitted in this category now first go through a temporary stay in the country for a few years. They study, they work. The language skills required are determined by the language of the program of study or by the employer. The preferred route is to obtain a degree in Canada and then work for as long as it takes to become eligible for permanent residence. The Canadian government facilitates this path by opening work permits for these postgraduates and their spouses. Canada seems to have understood that temporary immigration has become the gateway. It has implemented a type of open work permit for employers outside of Quebec who are recruiting francophones from abroad. So why deny Quebec employers the same privilege? Last year, Canada granted permanent residency outside Quebec to at least 5,000 francophone international students as a matter of public policy. This policy seems tailor-made to attract out-of-province international students with Quebec degrees. The high refusal rates of study permits for young people destined for francophone educational institutions, both in Quebec and outside of Quebec, is totally counterintuitive. We have demonstrated the importance of age and French language education for the trajectory of language retention. Moreover, this refusal is particularly unacceptable in the Quebec context. The Canada-Quebec Agreement provides that Quebec gives its consent to admitted international students. These students have been accepted into an accredited program designated by the Ministry of Education. They have obtained a Quebec acceptance certificate and from the Minister of the Department of Immigration, and it's not up to the federal government to subsequently deny the study permit. If the Canadian government is serious about protecting the French language throughout Canada, it is essential that it encourage and facilitate the arrival throughout the country of people from abroad who already use French, especially in the context of temporary immigration. Thank you very much. That was 5 minutes on the button. Now on to you, Mr. Tremblay. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Bernard Tremblay. I'm the president and CEO of the Fédération des Cégeps. Thank you for inviting me. I represent the 48 cégeps in Quebec. 43 of them are francophone, and we represent 195,000 students. More than 77,000 international students are enrolled in cégep, nearly 40% who come from France and 30% from French-speaking African countries. Welcoming these French-speaking students helps to counter the effects of demographic decline and maintain programs of study that would otherwise be closed due to insufficient enrollment. International students also contribute to the richness of the social fabric by their very presence. They promote openness to the world, to cultures, and diversity of realities among all members of their new community. When they stay in Quebec after their studies, they enter the job market, forming a new generation of workers that helps alleviate the labor shortages that are so evident in Quebec as elsewhere. By giving these francophone students the means to make a home in Quebec, we are promoting a healthy occupation of Quebec territory in French. We understand, therefore, why cégeps, which have always been an important engine of social and economic progress, make international recruitment a priority. But immigration processes have become a major obstacle to attracting and retaining those who choose our cégeps for study. Last February, I'll remind you that the Fédération des Cégeps made the members of the Standing Committee on Immigration and Citizenship aware of the obstacles that hinder the recruitment of international francophone students in our network. The data shared at that time was also submitted to you as part of my presentation. In concrete terms, cégeps are finding that the situation is particularly problematic with respect to students from French-speaking African countries. The rate of refusal for study permits for these applicants is very high and has been increasing for several years. Between 2015 and 2020, denial rates for the top 13 countries in Francophone Africa from Francophone African countries reached as high as 80%. No other region in the world has comparable refusal rates. The refusal rates are so exceptional that it's difficult to conclude otherwise that they are unfavorable depending on the country of origin of these applicants, but also on the level of education for which they are destined. The refusal rates in these countries are clearly higher when the applicants are admitted to cégep, and they decrease for graduate levels of for higher levels of education like graduate and bachelor's degrees. The problem we are presenting to you today is experienced by cégeps and the communities they serve. There's a a problem related to federal jurisdiction over immigration, which is shared by all Francophone communities in Canada. Questions arise. Is this situation the result of a systemic perspective of immigration processes towards Francophone African countries and a lack of knowledge of the Canadian Francophone education system? Could biases in the processing of study permits and operational issues in the immigration system explain the situation? Whatever the case, the situation cannot continue. I've seen it. We have seen it. It has an important impact on regions and the programs of study offered in CEGEPs, on the labor market, on social life, on the vitality of the French language, and above all, on the lives of young people admitted to our institutions. It has an impact on Canada's reputation as an educational destination and on the Canadian Francophonie as a whole. Migration barriers are not only an obstacle to recruitment, but also to the retention of CEGEP graduates. The majority of these students who wish to settle in Quebec apply to Quebec Experience Program for Workers or Quebec graduates. These programs aim to retain this qualified labor force that is integrated into our society. As soon as they have been selected by Quebec, these graduates apply for permanent residency, but the processing times for IRCC for these people is more than 2 years. The situation is incomprehensible, especially when we know that the delays for federally skilled workers, provincial nominees selected by Express Entry, or the Atlantic Canada Immigration Program are only 6 months. These very long delays for Quebec skilled workers and therefore our graduates are extremely harmful for the integration and retention of these people, in addition to having a strong impact on our reputation in Quebec and Canada among Francophone recruitment pools around the world. I would therefore like to make 3 requests to the committee. First, we must ensure that the processing of applications for study permits is equitable, fair, and transparent for all individuals, regardless of their country, language, or level of training. Secondly, the committee must ensure that IRCC initiatives promoting Francophone immigration do not lead to a spirit of competition between Francophone communities, whether in Quebec, Manitoba, or the Atlantic. It would be counterproductive to rob Peter to pay Paul. Finally, any program implemented to attract Francophones to Canada must be done in an equitable manner and in a way that increases the total number of Francophones in the country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. You went a little bit over, but it's not a problem. We're going to start with the first round of questions. Each party will have 6 minutes for questions and answers included. Mr. Chair, point of order. I would like to know what your intentions are on the time distribution for today, considering we had votes in the House. Are we taking a full hour for this first panel, and then we're going to shorten the second one, or do we split them evenly? I'll ask the clerk to find out if there are regulations and then also to know if there are availabilities among staff to go over. Madam Clerk, we can extend 10 minutes after the hour for a full 2 hours. So we can do a full 2 hours. Are there any people in the room that can also stay for the full 2 hours? Inaudible. The chair's mic is not on.
Monsieur le Président, vous êtes en sourdine.
Mr. Chair, your microphone is off. I'm so sorry. 2 years later, I'm still hitting the wrong button. So what I was trying to say is, Mr. Godin, does this answer your question? Everyone's available for 2 full-hour blocks for a total of 2 hours. So without any further ado, we are going to start with 60 minutes for every party. Mr. Généreux, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being here. CEGEPs in rural regions are prominent in Quebec. Out of the 48 CEGEPs in Quebec, many of them are in rural areas. You mentioned it a little bit in your opening remarks. The vitality of our regions, whether it's Rivière-du-Loup, Gaspésie, La Pocatière, Montmagny, etc., these CEGEPs add a lot to our communities, especially in the country. Can you talk about the vitality of communities and everything that you've asked for in your 3 requests? How does it apply for rural CEGEPs? What's the comparison between rural and urban CEGEPs? You know, we know that Quebec has a particular reality We are trying to support attraction of international students in rural regions, but I would say that the problems we've identified exist throughout the network. We're finding increasing numbers of international students in rural areas. This is an issue. It's actually more of a challenge for urban CEGEPs to attract enough students to fill the cohorts in certain programs. For example, to have equitable treatment for students who are applying for schools in Quebec, whether they're looking at urban or rural CEGEPs, it just seems like a matter of justice, I think. We want to make sure that CEGEPs in Quebec have a good reputation, but not just CEGEPs, all post-secondary education establishments in Quebec. The recruitment efforts we're deploying in French-speaking countries in Africa are going to be perceived as a failure if this doesn't go well, and this will reflect poorly on the rest of the country. You also talked about equity among the countries that we're trying to attract students from. Are you saying that some countries are being discriminated against? I'm not trying to judge anyone's intentions, but we do have to admit that the numbers are saying a lot. There is a clear difference between how files are treated from certain African countries compared to countries elsewhere in the world. So we need to analyze these files. IRCC needs to dig into this and take corrective action. This is something that is true for some countries, but also about the college-level education. You understand that Quebec's education system is unique with our CEGEPs. So you can understand that some immigration agents may misunderstand Quebec's education system, and this could generate bias in the treatment of applications. Mrs. Meggs, with all of your experience and your impressive pedigree, I'd like you to react to what Mr. Tremblay was saying about Canada's reputation. I'm going to change my question, actually. What do you think Canada's reputation is worldwide when it comes to choosing Canada as a destination country for education? It's clear that Canada is among the top 3 countries that is attractive to international students. Many students are attracted from China and India. This is normal. The issue with study permit requests out of Africa, and I heard the Department of Immigration's response and saying that the difference isn't great coming from Anglophone or Francophone countries. You know, this doesn't speak to the question about discrimination. There's another problem with this program. It's that one of the typical reasons to justify a refusal is that students are not demonstrating that they're going to leave after their studies. But this is absurd because it's been a clear policy for many years that we're trying to keep the international students.
So this is what's very illogical. And with what I've seen for English Canada and French Canada is that, of course, in Africa, there are many Francophones, but Nigerians have had problems as well, and this seems to coincide with the implementation of new electronic processing systems. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the federal level. Do you see discrimination with regards to African countries? Well, as Mr. Tremblay was saying, the results speak for themselves. The results show. Well, was that the intention? I worked at the federal government, and I don't think that the civil servants have any prejudices. I suspect that this has more to do with processes in place. Thank you. Next round of question, Mr. Francis Drouin. 5 minutes. Oh, 6 minutes, rather. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the witnesses before us today. My questions are for both witnesses. Mr. Tremblay, I'm looking at the appendix that you've tabled with the committee and the refusal rate. The refusal rate, well, we can see that there is a very high refusal rate from these countries with a Francophone population. Have you had discussions as to see why the refusal rate is so high? Is it a funding issue? Is it a question of security? I would say that yes, there are exchanges, but sometimes the answers are surprising. Mrs. Meigs just mentioned that some responses provided, to not show that you're going to leave the country, when in fact we try to retain these youth. And in Quebec, some receive bursaries, and then they are told that they've not demonstrated a sufficient financial capacity to study in Canada. And so it's a little bit surprising when the types of answers that we hear. As Mrs. Meigs, she said it might have to do with the Chinook system, but we think it might even predate the Chinook system. Of course, the Chinook system did not improve the situation at all. So it's difficult to put one's finger on the exact reason. We could note that there are sometimes differences if we look at the treatment centers. So the answers that we receive are very difficult to and unclear. And it seems to be that there's been no in-depth analysis of the system, and that is what we want. We want that all of the steps be looked at carefully. And as Mrs. Meigs was saying, even if people are full of goodwill, the figures speak for themselves and show unacceptable results. Yes, so did you have this conversation with your members? Is this a question of access to available services? For example, if they need to do biometric tests or security tests, is there an access issue with regards to some countries? Some countries that would, or people that would want to come and study here in Quebec? Well, access created an issue during the pandemic and even before. We know that access is difficult, and yes, there's an issue on that side. In many respects. Also, there are refusals on behalf of some candidates, and we have to remember that these were candidates that were accepted by the Quebec CEGEPs. And so I understand we're not immigration agents, but there was an analysis of the youth's file before accepting them for admission. So it's sometimes surprising to see the refusal, and there's a certain opaqueness as to the process. Oftentimes, it's hard to find out exactly where the answer originates from. So there's an opaqueness to the system, and this has been stated by different representatives of our organizations to different departments. So do your CEGEPs analyze? Well, I imagine they look at school level, academic level, can they pay the fees, but do they also see if they're able to live wherever they will be sent, or do they have enough money to pay for their living expenses? CEGEPs will look at the candidates and will assess those who might integrate successfully in Quebec. We don't, of course, do the same analysis as IRCC. That's not our role. But we do, when we look at the candidacies, we try to see who will be able to succeed. So we know the system, and we make sure that we have the best candidates. I have 1 minute left, so if I have to make a recommendation to the minister, and he will listen to me, what, in your opinion, would be the best recommendation to make? How can we recommend certain things with regards to the system? What could be done better? Well, I think we have to recognize the issue, do a quick analysis of the different elements of the system to make sure that it will produce an acceptable result, so that we have an acceptance rate that's comparable and that it compares to the rest of Canada when we speak about permanent residents as well. This is especially what we're asking for, and that there be a certain transparency in the system. Thank you. I'm right on time. Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Very disciplined. The next question, 6 minutes. Mr. Mario Beaulieu. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question, Mrs. Meggs, I saw an article that you wrote, and it said that there is a spike in temporary immigration, the number of people welcomed in Quebec with a temporary work permit or a study permit, and that there's been an explosion of the rates. So, and the Canadian government took what you called a shift. There's also, you spoke about a two-step immigration system. Don't you think this undermines the Canada-Quebec agreement that was signed for economic immigration? I've already written that I think that we're due to review the agreement, given that things have shifted. The question of temporary residence, there's at least one entire program, the International Mobility Program, where in the agreement it was not even taken into account. It was created after the signing of the agreement. So they did not take this into account, and it's the second largest program after the study permits. So there's work to be done. The specific issue with this shift, and we're talking about the agreement, well, there are many elements with regards to that, but also some of the elements that I was talking about and that determine the language that this person will use once they arrive in Canada. It's done before they arrive here, and if they arrive without speaking French, we have to train them. As for the temporary ones, there's no selection. If you look at the recruitment pool, you cannot go to Francophone countries. People arrive. There's no selection made on this basis. There's no linguistic requirement. So if they arrive and they go into English study programs, if they're working in English, it's very likely, even in Quebec, by the time they make a request to become a permanent resident, this is where the agreement enters into play. And they can have spent 5 or 6 years. And of course, if they make a request through the Quebec Experience Program, they have to demonstrate that they can speak French. I think there are quite a few people around the table who understand that passing a test in a second language doesn't mean that you're going to speak the language at home. So the question, and this shift creates specific problems for Francophone immigration, which is the subject we're talking about. Yes, and you say as well that the Canada-Quebec agreement said that Quebec had to give its agreement to students accepted right now. They're accepted in a program that's accredited by the Department of Immigration, whether it's CEGEP or a university. Then they receive a certificate of acceptance from the Department of Immigration in Quebec, and then They are massively refused, as we saw in the charts that Mr. Tremblay sent to us. Are you saying that it's not up to the federal government to refuse study permits? Do you think it would be possible to have some sort of procedure to make sure that it would be Quebec to determine if that the certificate of acceptance from Quebec be definitive? Well, there's a distinction in the agreement between permanent and temporary. And it says that it's very clear that if someone receives a certificate of selection from Quebec, so they've asked for permanent residency in Quebec, and Quebec has chosen them, the federal government then is required to offer permanent residency after having done the correct checks. But for the temporary ones, the wording is different. We say that has to give a consent, and so this has led to these certificates of acceptance from Quebec, and it's not what would be ideal for Quebec anyways. So the same rule could be applied. So if someone receives a certificate of acceptance from Quebec, that their study permit should follow. And that's not the case right now. That would be ideal. A question from Mr. Tremblay earlier. You said that we shouldn't undress Peter to dress Paul. And so in the bill, C-13, we talk about encouraging Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. According to what you've said, don't you think that we should say in Quebec as well, in Quebec and outside of Quebec? I would say that we're aware of the issues of Francophone areas outside of Quebec, but we would like to have an overall approach and that we keep in mind the impact of the choices that are made, the impact on Quebec and vice versa, to make sure that Francophone communities are vibrant throughout Canada. Thank you. Next question, 6 minutes. Mrs. Nikki Ashton, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Thank you very much for your testimony today. I find it quite troubling. Outside of Quebec, we know the issues with regards to Francophone immigration, the work shortages in communities and in Francophone education centers. But to hear this in terms of students that you're trying to welcome in Quebec and Francophone CEGEPs, this is very troubling. Mrs. Meggs, my first question, you talked about processing systems. So how can you compare what you've seen as a result before the system was in place compared to the results that we are having now? Well, the changes on the federal level, I don't know them quite as well. I started to notice, as everyone did, that problems were quite blatant. And Mr. Tremblay said this even predates Chinook. But this leads to a lot of questions. We're not trying to accuse anyone of being prejudiced, but the arguments that are being used to refuse study permits of African Francophones don't seem to be applied with the same rigor. When we look at students from different countries. For example, students from India. In Quebec, we've had a lot of issue with young Indian students in their private colleges, and we heard all kinds of horrible stories. And there's an entire file that started yesterday in the Toronto Star with it says that the students are being treated like cheap labor. They're manipulated. They're controlled by employers. And why? Why? Because they know that they're not there to study. They're there to for immigration purposes. And I think that this has to be debated. Is the idea of recruiting a massive amount of youth as students to keep them for the money that they're spending, for the cheap labor that they provide in the hotel sectors and others. And there's a third one. And so it's really horrible. In order to reach immigration targets, then the federal government decided that they wanted to increase the targets for permanent residents, and so they opened the gates to temporary immigration. And the problem is severe because they don't have the same rights, whether it be students or workers. They don't have the same rights. They are manipulated because employers are using this. And so the argument to say, well, you haven't convinced us that you're not going to leave the country doesn't hold. And secondly, if you look at the articles in the Toronto Star, these poor youth, they're allowed to work 20 hours a week during the session. And that's not sufficient for the Indian students, notably, and for others as well. So what do? Well, they're working under the table, and this allows employers to say, oh, well, there you go. You want your permanent residency, you worked under the table, and they're working for less than a minimum wage. So this entire idea of going through the temporary permit rather than recruiting directly from foreign countries and giving them permanent residency on arrival, there's never been a debate on this, not in Quebec and not in Canada. And Quebec followed Canada in the shift, but we do need to have this discussion. It's not necessarily a good thing for people who are arriving. Maybe it's great for our economy and employers, but for the people who are arriving and don't have access to welcome services that permanent residents have, well, I've been writing on this for 3 years, and I think it's really sad. And as you were saying with regards to French, this contributes to the decline of the French language, the fact that enough people are not being brought in. Mr. Tremblay, I see that my time is almost up. I wanted to ask you, are Anglophone CEGEPs having these same issues as the Francophone CEGEPs with regards to international students? Is this answer? Yes, I think that we have to look at attracting international Francophone students, and I was really hearing Mrs. Meggs' concern, but I would also put the emphasis on the fact that in Quebec, the CEGEPs really follow up on the youth. The youth that are recruited are youth that are recruited for regions and in places where there's a labor shortage, and when we look at a college certificate, it's a 3-year certificate, and so we really seek to integrate these youth. It's not a short training that we can see somewhere else. Thank you, Mr. Tremblay. Mrs. Ashton, second round of question. Mr. Lehoux will begin. 5 minutes. Mr. Lehoux, I'm giving you the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for being here. My question for Mr. Tremblay, because you mentioned that you didn't really agree with Mrs. Meggs on this debate, because I found that what she was saying was quite interesting. We do have a huge issue in regions. In Beauce, for example, we have a certain of difficulty in retaining students. And what I'm understanding here is that we've not had a debate when we tell the youth, okay, you're going to come here to study, and we allow them to work only 20 hours a week, and then we're going to say, oh, well, you didn't come for the right reason. In Canada, I know a lot of youth that are able to work more than 20 hours a week, and I don't know what your point of view is on this, Mr. Tremblay.
En fait, merci.
Thank you. So I can bring some clarifications to what I said. I don't want to contradict Ms. Meggs. I wanted to insist on the fact that our priority in Quebec, in CEGEPs, is to give young people from the international community to have the opportunity to complete a 3-year degree. So we support students. We see that they want to integrate. And so once they obtain their degree, I think it's safe to say that these young people have already taken root and have had experiences that favor their integration in the regions where they studied. There's always this issue of the regions versus the urban centers, and so we think that we are giving international students the opportunity to go in the regions like Matane, Three Rivers, etc., in the hopes that after 3 years of training, of schooling, they will want to stay in the region with a degree that is recognized in the country and that they obtained in one of our institutions. There are shorter studies, like certificates, for example, but our focus is on training international students. So what is the problem, according to you? These young people are only asking to integrate into society here in Canada. But the regulation stipulates that they cannot work more than 20 hours a week. Should we not change that rule? These young people, when they work on the weekends, that allows them to integrate into the community where they work. I think we could reflect on that, certainly. Working 20 hours a week is still substantial for a full-time student. So I would say that this doesn't seem to be the most problematic issue, this 20-hour limit. What we're focused on is the obstacle to arrival and the difficulty that young people encounter in getting their study visa, their student visa. Sorry, Mr. Tremblay. I spoke with the CEGEP in my writing, and we really wonder why there are 80% of claims that are refused. I think we have identified the problem, so now I think we need to find the right solution. But it's unbelievable that so many students have their claims refused. So if we have a better knowledge of the Quebec education system, a student that has university training could still want to go to college to complement their degree. And it is justified in many African countries. And so I think it's important for agents to better understand the Quebec education system. And beyond Quebec's education system, we need to be cognizant that we have to deploy multiple efforts for the francophonie. I would like to ask a last question before my time is up. If we want to retain these youths, how should we proceed? That's important, and it's still a very difficult thing to do. Thank you, Monsieur Lehoux. And now, Ms. Kayabaga, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. I have a first question for Monsieur Tremblay. You said that 40% of your students come from France and 30% from elsewhere. What do you think of the fact that the biggest pool of francophones is in Africa, and it is from Africa that there is the highest level of refusal of applications? Only 40% of francophones come from France, and so why so many refusals from the biggest pool of francophones in the world? We wish to welcome a higher rate of African students. We're deploying a lot of efforts to create relationships with African countries, and so that's why that refusals lead to a lot of frustrations because study permits are not given, and we don't understand why. What efforts are you deploying to strengthen ties with Africa or develop ties with the continent? We have a lot of contacts in different countries, so I could give you 10 African countries with which we organize missions and promotional events. We also establish relationships with embassies and consulates. We've recently heard African students complain about the fact that the process is difficult at every level, be it to obtain a visa or even when treating with the college itself. Sometimes the college takes their money and does not return the money when their application is refused. So what would you say about that? I represent public colleges, and so we pride ourselves in welcoming the students and accompanying them throughout the process. CEGEPs are usually welcoming, and I think that we could increase the proportion of African students. If we want to increase the hours that international students are allowed to work, how many hours would you suggest that they be allowed to work? I would have a hard time giving you a hard number there. Do you think that by increasing the amount of hours they're allowed to work, would more students want to come study here? Once again, in my opinion, it's not the main issue for international students. I don't think that the main problem is the limited amount of hours that they can work, because we want them to focus on their studies. They have the opportunity through their studies to create social relationships and integrate into the society. But I wonder if students or others benefit of this lower amount of hours. Ms. Meg allowed us to reflect on the issue, and she is right to encourage us to do so. We have grant programs, bursaries that allows students to have to work less. I'm not saying that the economic factor isn't a factor, but I think that the main issue is being approved to come to Canada and study. Last year, the Quebec government did not want to widen the program for fast-tracking permanent residency for people working in the healthcare system. What do you think about this? It's people from Haiti are in this group, but it's difficult to know if this would make a big difference. They're francophones. They're all francophones. Sorry for interrupting you. I'm not trying to be impolite. I'm just doing my job. And now, Mr. Mario Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Ms. Meggs, you said that the Canadian government has offered work permits for employers outside of Quebec that want to recruit francophones from abroad, but they don't extend the same privilege to Quebec employers. My constituents have often told me that if I went outside Quebec, there were shorter delays, but if I wanted to go to Quebec, they wanted to go to Quebec but couldn't. And so is this a widespread phenomenon? So You're talking about hiring temporary foreign workers? Yes, so there are open work permits for employers outside of Quebec that are recruiting Francophone workers from abroad, but the same thing does not exist in Quebec. That surprised me when I found out that there was a cap. And Quebec employers complain at length about delays with the temporary foreign workers program. If they could hire Francophones, I think that they would jump on the opportunity. It doesn't mean that they will find these people easily. You've also said that if we don't guarantee the survival of French in Quebec, then the survival of French in the rest of the country is an illusion. Could you comment on that? It will always be a challenge to maintain the survival of the French language in North America. But to have a critical mass of Francophones within Quebec will help Francophones outside of Quebec. Without a critical mass of Francophones in Quebec, I don't think that we can guarantee the survival of French communities outside of Quebec. I was in the Ontario government previously, and I can tell you that this is the case. Next question. Ms. Ashton, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Ms. Meggs, you might know that the government had a target of welcoming 4.4% Francophone immigrants from 2003 to 2023 to stabilize the demographics of Francophones outside of Quebec. We've never reached this target, and so the Official Languages Commissioner recommends that the government implement a Francophone immigration strategy in order to reestablish this demographic balance within these communities. What should this policy look like? Ideally, we could recruit from abroad directly to find Francophones. The problem is that when we only hire foreign workers, people come here, they study in English, and to think that they will switch and then speak French at home in order to ensure that French survives in the province is unreasonable. The Francophone immigration program must be for all of Canada, and I think that we should have linguistic requirements for foreign workers or foreign students, and even when they are temporary, so that once they are permanent residents, they become Francophones. Many recommend a target that is much higher than 4.4% to make up for lost time. Do you think that we should increase this target in order to have more Francophones in the country? I worked in accountability, and if we're not able to reach a target, I don't see why we would increase the target. What we have to change is the way that we're going about things. In Quebec, we said, we were at 15%, we're going to increase this target to 25%, but we weren't able to reach the 20% target. If nothing changes, why change the target? Sorry, Ms. Meggs. We have to temporarily suspend the session a little later to welcome the second panel. So the next two questions will be asked by Mr. Godin and Ms. Latanzio. Mr. Godin, go ahead. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Meggs, your philosophy of not increasing targets when we're not able to reach the first target is interesting. We need to find solutions to reach those targets that exist already. We have to make up for lost time where immigration is concerned. We have a lot of catching up to do. What would be a realistic target for catching up, say? And how many years would it take for us to catch up? I think it will be extremely difficult to catch up. I don't know what we're trying to catch up on. What level would be an acceptable level, according to you? I'm not sure. But Francophones outside of Quebec and even in Quebec are starting to speak English more and more often. And it's wishful thinking to think that we will bring immigrants here and that they won't be doing the exact same thing as native French speakers here in this country. It's a difficult issue. Thank you, Ms. Meggs. I have another question. Earlier, you've spoken of the computer system and the high level of refusal of applications coming from the African continent. Mr. Tremblay mentioned earlier could we transfer rules that were applied previously and that the computer system is what amplified the issue? Yes, we often hear about algorithms having an intrinsic bias. I have another question for you, Ms. Meggs. You said that in Canada, we don't want to retain immigrants, and Quebec does. So there's a paradox there. You've spoken of an update of the agreement between Canada and Quebec. I think that's an important element because with the current labor shortage, if we bring immigrants to Canada, we would like to keep them in Canada. Ms. Latanzo, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are for Mr. Tremblay. Mr. Tremblay, you said that the Fédération des Cégeps represents 195,000 students divided among 44 CEGEPs, correct? Could you please break that down for us and say how many of those students attend Francophone CEGEPs and how many of these students attend English CEGEPs, Anglophone CEGEPs? When we speak of CEGEPs in Quebec, we're speaking of public institutions, so 43 Francophone CEGEPs and 5 Anglophone CEGEPs. So the Anglophone CEGEPs have about 30,000 students all over Quebec. I did mention that there are 7,000 foreign students, which is a very low number. I think we could welcome a lot more of them, which means 7,000 students on 200,000 students is a small number. When I say that we take good care of our foreign students, that's what I'm referring to. I'm sure I will run out of time, so I will ask my questions, and if you are unable to complete your answers in the allotted time, I would ask that you send written responses, please. What is your federation's role on teaching French or encouraging French learning with immigrants, and what are the main obstacles that immigrants encounter when they try to learn French in Quebec? I only have a minute to answer, so I will be sending in a written response, but CEGEPs play a role in helping foreign students learn French. Most international students that we welcome have a good basis in French, and if it's not their mother tongue, we will accompany them throughout their studies so that we can help them improve their French. we have an agreement with the Immigration Department of Quebec, and they offer French learning services, and I can send you details by email. Thank you, Ms. Latanzio, just before suspending. Thank you, Ms. Meggs. Thank you, Mr. Tremblay, for your impassioned pleas. I think this will be very useful for our report. To come back on what Ms. Latanzio has said, if you think that you have other relevant information that you would like to send us, please do not hesitate to send it in writing to our clerk. All the information that you will be sending will be useful to us. We will suspend for 5 minutes and we will resume with the second panel. Thank you.
second group of witnesses. For the second hour today, we have from the Fédération de la Jeunesse Franco-Ontarienne, Jacqueline Jimeni, representative for the Greater Toronto Area Board of Representatives, and Bonnie Guy-Roland-Cadio, liaison and political analysis coordinator. From the Francophone Immigration Support Network, Francophone Immigration Support Network of Eastern Ontario, Brigitte Duguay-Langlais, coordinator, and from the University of Sudbury, Serge Miville, president and vice chancellor. So each of you will have 5 minutes for some opening remarks. I'll let you know when you have about a minute and then 15 seconds. Following these opening statements, we will move on to questions from members of the committee. So, Mrs. Jimeni, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, I thank you for inviting me to appear before you as part of your review of Francophone immigration to Quebec and Canada. My name is Jacqueline Jimeni Nengum. I'm a student in 11th grade at Ronald Marion High School. I'm from Cameroon and immigrated to Canada 2.5 years ago. As you know, Canada has never reached its target of 4.4% of Francophone immigration outside of Quebec each year since 2008. Moreover, according to the latest report of the Commissioner of Official Languages, it is uncertain that this target will be reached by the 2023 deadline. Yet, this Francophone immigration is crucial not only to maintain the demographic weight of the French-speaking population outside of Quebec and the development and vitality of Francophone communities, but it's also for schools, many of which depend on Francophone newcomers to have sufficient critical mass. In this context, I encourage the committee members to consider the following recommendations. The first concern is about raising immigrants' awareness of the realities of their host community both before and during their integration. The second is to strengthen the capacity of Francophone schools in minority settings and to act as catalysts for integration into Francophone communities. It is important that young immigrants understand the realities of their host communities in advance so that they could be better prepared mentally, financially, and better informed about the way of life in these communities, the potential challenges and opportunities that they may face. As a result, they will be able to adapt to their host country more easily, with less stress, because they will have known what to expect before arriving. First of all, there's a need for a good awareness of the host society's way of life, and then a knowledge of the languages that are spoken in the host country and in the city they live in, and finally, how schools work. School can be a place to encourage socialization, and it plays an important role in the reception and integration of new French-speaking students. It is important for immigrants to be well welcomed and integrated into the school environment from the start. Indeed, it is not everyone that is able to express themselves easily or to learn about the new realities of their host country and school. So if the school is welcoming, it can play a very important role in the students' academic and social integration. In order to make school welcoming for young immigrants, the entire school personnel, students, teachers, and administrators must have a spirit of collaboration and a welcoming and enthusiastic approach. Also, teachers need to be able to understand that immigrant students do not necessarily have the same school curriculum or educational background as local students. Being a member of a Francophone youth organization is important in many ways. For me, and certainly for many other young people, it contributes and strengthens my Francophone identity, my pride, and my distinctiveness in the community. It also helps me get involved in the development of my community to develop and reinforce skills, social and learning abilities in French. My experience at FESFO is a good example of this. FESFO is a life experience in French outside of my school, and it has allowed me to develop new skills, my sense of organization, critical thinking, and leadership. It has allowed me to discover and meet new people, to deepen my intellectual knowledge, Mr. Chair, I conclude by my opening statement with this. I appreciate having the opportunity to answer questions from the committee. Thank you, Mrs. Jemeni. You still had a whole minute left on your time. Congratulations on respecting the criteria. Now on to Brigitte Duguay-Langlais for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, hello, and thank you for welcoming me today. As the coordinator for the Réseau de soutien à l'immigration francophone de l'Est de l'Ontario for nearly 8 years now, let me tell you in a few words what the network represents. It is funded by the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada for the last 15 years. The network is managed and coordinated by the Economic and Social Council of Ottawa, Carleton, often known as CSOC. Through consultation, planning, and the promotion of partnership and immigration initiatives between stakeholders from different sectors in Eastern Ontario, the network aims to foster the successful attraction, reception, settlement, and socioeconomic integration of Francophone newcomers. It is considered an indirect settlement service. I won't try to convince you today that Francophone immigration is a key factor in developing and the vitality of our Francophone minority communities. We all understand that, and we believe it. Today, over the last few years, we have seen a growing willingness on the part of federal government to promote reception, integration, and retention of Francophone immigrants in Canada. However, the means to do so have not been optimized, and there is still a long way to go. Today, I would like to present a few shortcomings we've identified, as well as some solutions. First, the government machine needs to understand that immigration is not just a part of the Canadian social fabric. We cannot put all of the responsibility for achieving this target on the Department of Immigration, Refugees, and Canadian Citizenship. Francophone immigration is a path to integration. So there's a horizontal responsibility for integration throughout government, and every department must take responsibility in the success of this path and achieving this target. I would suggest that IRCC coordinate an initiative between departments to raise awareness and create responsibility for the whole government, as well as provincial and territorial governments, with progress and achieving this target. I would like to talk about the regionalization of Francophone immigration. As you know, the largest Francophone communities in Ontario are often found in rural, semi-rural, or even in northern Ontario. Many studies have shown that these communities are experiencing demographic decline and, as a result, economic decline because of a lack of labor in these communities. This morning, there were calls for a new target that would go from 4.4% to 12.12% in 2024. This demonstrates the urgency of this issue. Newcomers often go to large centers like Toronto or Ottawa. The consequence is that rural areas are unknown, undervalued. Newcomers that are Francophone tell us that they learned about the existence of Francophonie in Ontario way too late, or have only just heard recently about the quality of the French language education in Ontario. The fact that they learned this late affects their entire journey, where they live, where they go to school, where they work, etc. They must be able to make these decisions in an informed manner and to know the opportunities that Francophone communities offer them before they even arrive on Canadian soil. Therefore, Francophone community organizations must be allowed to organize missions abroad in order to promote Francophone communities and their richness. We have to ensure that non-French settlement agencies refer their clients to Francophone services whenever possible, or at least to promote Francophone schools, communities, and jobs. In closing, I could not ignore the housing crisis in Canada. This crisis literally jeopardizes the success of many fine initiatives that have been put in place to promote the integration and retention of new residents in our communities. Initiatives such as the Welcoming Francophone Communities in Hawkesbury, Hamilton, and Sudbury in Ontario, or the implementation of the second Francophone Refugee Resettlement Support Program in Cornwall, Ontario. These are great initiatives from IRCC that we applaud, but they will not take off as expected if affordable housing is not available. So here are some great examples. Here is a great example of IRCC's efforts that could be jeopardized if other departments do not activate to contribute to their success. When we talk about housing in the immigration file, we're talking about affordable housing. These people are not advantaged by the way the financial system works in Canada. They have limited means, for example, because they have no credit history in this country. Thank you, Mrs. Langlais. You'll be able to complement this information with your questions. I was almost done. Thank you very much. I will leave the floor now to Mr. Miville. You have 5 minutes as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the Official Languages Committee for the privilege of attending this session to talk about the importance of Francophone immigration in Quebec and Canada. I would like to address 3 points in this presentation. The first is a review of the social function of French language universities in minority settings. The second deals with the importance of immigration to linguistic vitality in Ontario's near north. And finally, I'd like to discuss the challenges facing French language universities in the regions that are struggling to reach their full potential in attracting and retaining international students. Historically, French Ontario has been seen as a national minority or a small society. This premise assumes that it's an agent of its own history, an autonomous political subject, and that it acts as a pole of societal integration. The university, in addition to being a lever for social, cultural, and economic development, acts as a vector of integration and a place of critical reflection, critical thought that allows that has a part of universal education. This is how French Ontario can have a societal debate based on the Franco-Ontarian societal existence. To paraphrase sociologist Joseph-Yvon Thériault, if society creates the university creates society, hence the existential importance of these institutions in a Francophone minority setting. The Francophone community in Sudbury has a critical need for immigrants in order to maintain its linguistic and cultural vitality and to meet challenges of labor shortages. The Northern Policy Institute estimates that between 46 and 64% of future immigrants will need to be Francophone in order to maintain the current proportion of Francophones in the Greater Sudbury area, which is at 28%. End of paraphrase. Yet only 11 people per 1,000 were born outside of the region, one of the lowest rates in Canada. The role of the university community is to act as a magnet for immigration populations. French language universities in rural regions are essential elements in contributing to the linguistic vitality because of their role in social inclusion and their ability to reduce job shortages. However, systemic issues reduce the capacity of institutions to reach their full potential in this regard. The visa issue highlighted by our colleagues in other post-secondary institutions are a reality. Throughout its history, Canada has always, through formal or informal mechanism, limited access to French language immigration. We are paying the price today. Reversing this trend requires significant investment in academic institutions and in the reinvention of Canada's reception mechanisms and migration policies. Post-secondary institutions are choice levers in attracting and retaining and integrating immigrant populations in minority settings. In Middle North Ontario, the university community has unfortunately done very poorly in attracting and retaining international Francophone students when compared, for example, to what Université of Hearst has achieved. A large part of its student population comes from abroad. Many decide to stay. This contributes considerably to the renewal and vitality of Franco-Ontarian region.
L'accueil et l'accompagnement.
Welcoming and accompanying international students is a huge issue in regions like Sudbury, and the needs are critical. However, we lack the means. The province does not subsidize international students, causing an imbalance in capacity between institutions in urban and regional centers. Some are able, for example, to offer tuition waivers, a practice that is difficult to implement at the same level in the regions because of the high cost of education. The immigration needs are far greater, proportionately, for the northern region. Without a coherent strategy and without the means, French language university institutions in the regions would simply not be able to provide services to attract and retain the immigrant population needed to preserve and promote the linguistic, cultural, and economic vitality of the French language in areas such as the Middle North. And this is the challenge we face. Thank you. Thank you. Very close to the time. First round of question. 6 minutes each member of the committee. First, Vice President Joël Godin, 6 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the three witnesses, Mrs. Jumini, Duguay-Langlais, and Mr. Miville. So let's go to the heart of the issue. Fédération Jeunesse Franco-Ontarienne, Mrs. Jumini, you spoke about the fact that we need to improve integration and means to welcome and to treat our immigrants well. But could you also talk about the current situation and on the fact that Francophone immigration is a problem? Are you seeing this problem in the field? Not really. But before I came here, I did, not always, but with my experience, yes, I did see this. Yes, so what I would like to say is thank you, because I do share your comment, which is that when we have immigrants come to Canada, we have to take care of them to allow them to integrate. And there is a culture shock. There is an adaptation period, and the community has to welcome them. Our problem is, yes, we do have to take care of them, but we have less and less. So we have to have means to welcome more immigrants. So you're right. We do have to welcome people and find ways to have more people come here. So this is my comment. My other question for Mrs. Duguay-Langlais. You said that the governmental machine to reach targets has to work horizontally from several different departments. But first of all, the problem that we've identified is Francophone immigration. And the key to this, I believe, is found within the Department of Immigration. The first department is the door to entry, and then, of course, the other departments must work together and be more welcoming, as Mrs. Jumini was saying. So could you speak to this vision that we should work horizontally with different departments in order to welcome more Francophone immigrants? Mrs. Duguay-Langlais. Thank you. Perhaps not necessarily for welcoming immigrants, but especially for integration and retention. You're right when you say that the first department for recruiting and for having immigrants come here is the Department of Immigration. But once here, there is, for example, Canadian Heritage, Health, Social Development, the economic departments. They should all have a branch within. As developers in the communities, oftentimes we're asking a lot of things of IRCC. For example, the housing problem is directly linked to welcoming and retaining. That's not IRCC. At that point, we need other provincial efforts or something else. Thank you. And you made another comment in your opening statements to allow organizations to meet people overseas. And I think you're better placed to convince people overseas to come to Canada. And I think that it's unfortunate that the department is not using your talent and your knowledge, because you are the best ambassadors, the best people to sell Francophone Canada overseas. So this could be a recommendation made by the committee, I believe. I hope so. And I also hope that the provinces will invest, and because the federal-provincial relationship is very important in this case. For some provinces, such as New Brunswick, the province of New Brunswick pays to send community delegations, and they go promote Acadie overseas. So there is a provincial responsibility, but the federal government has to coordinate. And yes, and I think that's a great suggestion that you're making. And I think that we also have to be realistic. There is a worker shortage here in Canada, but elsewhere. And in some countries, the unemployment rate is very high. So could we have an overall vision here and a holistic vision, and you could be a part of the solution? Thank you, Mrs. Duguay-Langlais. Now, my question is for the Vice Chancellor of the Mr. Miville. You said that you would need up to 64% of Francophone immigration to maintain what you currently have. That's a huge number. Could you explain further? Northern Ontario is a region where the average age of citizens is high, and we're experiencing depopulation. So big youth have left, and they move to urban centers for post-secondary education. And so we have a lot of catching up to do. That is why we need a strategy. We need to have a strategy for regions. Thank you, Mr. Miville. Next question, our Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Marc Serré, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to today's witnesses. Mrs. Mini, this reminds me of the leadership camps when I was young, and so I hope that, well, this was a few years ago, I have to admit. Maybe if I have the time, I'll come back to this question, but I would like to speak to issues raised by Mrs. Duguay-Langlais and Mr. Miville. I've liked your testimony a lot because the previous testimonies that we had spoke about visa offices and challenges that we experience with immigration, and also the targets that are not met. So we have a lot of work to be done as a federal government. We do need to work jointly with the provinces. But you both mentioned separate things. Mrs. Duguay-Langlais, you talked about community organizations in rural areas and in regions. And Mr. Miville, you talked about reinventing the way that we work with post-secondary institutions. Mr. Miville, thank you very much for the work that you're doing and that you've done over the past few years in Northern Ontario. Could you add to the federal government recommendations to see how we could reinvent the model? How can we reinvent this, and what role can be played by the federal government? For us, it's clear that French language institutions on a post-secondary level are the best placed to ensure successful journey for people who are immigrating or even local people so that they can live in a dynamic economy. I think there's a lot to be done on the federal side to see how we're going to equip regional institutions so that they'll be able to fulfill their full potential. Universities offer a journey over 4 years, and they can contribute to the societal integration and the success of students coming from overseas. When we welcome them, we can connect them with the cultural setting, with healthcare. We are a hub for integration and for success. We're going to link them with future employers. We're going to equip them with the skills that are necessary for the competitivity of our country, of our region. And They have to be able to compete internationally. It's a globalized world. When I think of post-secondary Francophone institutions, they have to be equipped. We have to make sure that they have the necessary means so that they can do this work. And imagine targets in the region so that we can catch up. Thank you, Mr. Mainville. And Mrs. Duguay-Langlais, if we look at the federal government and the post-secondary institutions, and you are speaking to community organizations in regions, could you expand on the role played by the federal government and the provinces? We have thousands of students who are studying in post-secondary institutions, but they don't stay in Canada, or they'll go to cities, or they won't stay in the regions, they'll go back to their home country. So how can we support these students so that they'll stay in regions such as the east and the north of Ontario? This is a very good question. In 2021, the Canadian Association of Francophone Universities and Colleges of Canada worked, and IRCC asked for a study, and the result of this study, published in November of 2020, was to consult with Francophone post-secondary institutions and to see how this role could be played. And I'm very pleased. But I think that there are some Francophone universities who really think it's important to think about what happens after university. We have the Cité Collégiale here in Ottawa, and they can help us also to integrate these students in our community. We need the university to help. They have a huge role to play. Some larger universities are not interested in doing this, so we need to have collaboration with post-secondary institutions so that presentations can be made on programs, for example, of permanent residence, international students. This is a cornerstone for us. It's very important, this IRCC program. International students have to be aware of it, and we have to promote these services. Our communities have to be aware of it. We have to say, okay, this is what we have to offer you. Please stay, and this is what we have to offer you. There's a lot of work to be done with post-secondary institutions. Thank you, Mrs. Duguay-Langlais. Thank you to the three witnesses. Second Vice President of the committee, Mr. Mario Beaulieu, 6 minutes. Thank you. On one hand, I think that all the witnesses spoke to the importance of integration. And if we have Francophone immigration in Francophone communities outside of Quebec, if the assimilation rate continues to be as high as it is right now, it's almost as if you're trying to fill a bucket that already has a hole in it. So how do you think it would be possible to encourage the maintaining of the language and to counter assimilation? Who are you asking? All three of you. I will have a go at it. I'll give you my opinion. The issue of assimilation is an important one, and there's a lot of work that remains to be done, especially for Francophone immigrants. We work with Anglophone institutions. You heard in my testimony where I spoke to the importance that non-Francophone institutions have. Settlement organizations, they have to be aware of who we are and what is the value of settling in Francophone communities. We're fighting against these partners, and they put them in Anglophone schools, and then we lose them. And we also have to promote our communities ourselves, because people come to Ontario for English. We receive Francophones from some African countries, and they say, oh, I'm not going to Quebec. I know French. I'm going to Ontario to learn English. They think that living in an English community, to have their children in an English school, it will be a solution. There's something that has to be deconstructed here with Francophone Ontario. Yes, I would have a comment because we have very little time. Even if you went, we saw the refusal rate of foreign students for Francophone universities outside of Quebec and in Quebec is much higher than for Anglophone universities. I was reading an article recently. Someone from a Francophone university outside of Quebec was saying exactly that, and that the students are refused in the end. And most of those that are accepted by the institution are then refused by immigration. So how do you explain this disconnect? Is it discrimination? How can we explain this high refusal rate? We know that it's linked to African countries, or Algeria, for example. I have a theory on this, and I'm not sure if you will allow me to speak to my theory. Perhaps Ms. Jiminy would have something to add. And I'm going to, I'm daring to say this today. The federal government has good intentions. Truly, I really believe in these good intentions with regards to Francophone immigration. There's a true desire of making headway. And then you have the community and the support organizations in the communities. We work on a daily basis with the Francophone immigrant. So the gap between the two remains to be filled. There's a lot of work to be done. And we do a little bit, the civil servants do a little bit, but there's a huge gap. And then the message of political will, and when we arrive in the field, all of a sudden, the culture of departments, the culture of work, training, integration, when we say, okay, we want to have Francophone refugees, is the message sent to the recruiters so that they can come to Cornwall? Well, how can we explain that year after year, and I believe Mrs. Jiminy spoke to this, that the Department of Immigration never reached its target of 4.4% since 2008. So at some point, there's something that's wrong if year after year the targets are not reached and there's no improvement. And if they're not able to explain why these problems exist, there's something that's not right. If we speak to solutions now, someone spoke about the importance of having a critical mass of Francophones. I think that most studies demonstrate that Francophone immigration usually happens when there's a critical mass of Francophones. There's a greater chance that people will not be assimilated into English. Would it not be good to target regions, places where there's a greater concentration of Francophones? I would say yes. And I did not succeed in saying what I was saying, but my last recommendation was that the government should prioritize, whether it be for housing or something else. My last comment was that the 14 communities that were chosen in Canada to become Francophone communities be chosen. The federal government invested a lot of money. There are 14. Start by working there. All the departments can work in these communities. Thank you, Mrs. Duguay-Langlais. That's all the time we have. You can continue. Mrs. Ashton, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup et merci à tous les...
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses. And as a Francophile outside of Quebec and Manitoba, I thank you for your testimony. Really, this reflects the message in Francophone communities.
I think that according to what you said, it's essential that we give tangible recommendations to support Francophone communities outside of Quebec. I wanted to quickly touch on what you said, Ms. Duguay-Langlais. This committee has often spoken about the labor shortage in education in Francophone communities outside of Quebec. I've shared my own experience in this committee. Our family, have tried to register our kids in a Francophone daycare, but the wait list is very long. We helped sponsor qualified people without the federal government's support. And after all of that, there's still a labor shortage, and my kids and kids of other Francophones and Francophiles cannot attend Francophone daycare, and we are left with no other choice than to send them in an English-speaking daycare. We have thus lost the window of opportunity to offer Francophone education to our kids. We are trying for preschool, but I think that we should have had the opportunity before preschool in daycare. When we talk about recruitment, meaning recruiting Francophones from abroad, should we prioritize educators, daycare workers? What do you think? Thank you. The greatest, if a community, Francophone community, loses a French-speaking daycare, that breaks my heart. A Francophone daycare just closed in Kingston because there aren't enough staff. There are many parents who wish to send their kids in these Francophone daycares, but please understand that a Francophone daycare that closes in a Francophone community is dramatic. This automatically leads to demographic loss. Ms. Ashton, you just touched on a very important point. Our network will organize a forum in May to discuss recruiting foreign workers so that they be trained here to work in childcare, so that we can demonstrate how to recruit internationally to Francophone daycares. This file is extremely important, and the network is working on this file. Thank you for your answer. Thank you for sharing the situation in Kingston. It's very worrying. I hope that this conference will be open to Francophone communities and Francophones outside of Ontario, because the situation is ever more critical day by day here and in other provinces. I also wanted to ask Ms. Gemini a question. What kind of obstacles do immigrants encounter, namely foreign students that wish to obtain permanent residency? For example, this committee has heard troubling stories regarding services offered by IRCC and regarding the equality of language exams. Could you share your perspective regarding obstacles that encounter immigrants that wish to come to Canada and become permanent residents? Thank you for your question. I think that there are numerous obstacles. For me, it was using my language. Language insecurity is a problem that affects most people coming to a new country. If you come to a new country and you don't speak the language, this is very stressful. And as an international student, for international students, this will complicate things. They're coming here to study, and they might not come to Canada because they want to be able to speak the language properly before starting studies in this language. Thank you. I think we still have a few seconds, 15 seconds to be exact. Do you have any recommendations to give us? We need to talk and work on linguistic insecurity. We really have to keep it in mind. Thank you, Ms. Jiminy. We have completed our first round of questions. Now we will start the second round with Mr. Jacques Gourde. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. It is clearly very difficult to attain the targets set by the government. It's very difficult for a Francophone student from abroad to be accepted in a Francophone academic institution. The French language exam is very difficult. I think that maybe 90% of public servants would fail this exam. This exam should be required for anyone wanting to become a CEO in Canada. But when you invest 3 to 5 to 10 years in a country, when you study for this long in a country and that you acquire Canadian skills, it would be much easier for the student to find work in Canada. And for others who are very highly skilled and come to Canada, we have to recognize these skills. But often they have to go back to school. And so this further complicates Francophones coming to Canada. With all the political will in the world, and if we did everything in our power for things to work better, would our Canadian universities be able to welcome maybe 30, 40, 50,000 Francophone students every year? Do you have any comments? Mr. Chair, could you please let the witnesses finish their answers? Thank you. My question is for all three of you. Ms. Duguay, if you would like to start. I think Mr. Miville would be better placed to answer. I don't know what Francophone universities, what their capacity is here in Canada to welcome foreign students that speak French. I would humbly suggest that in regions like Northern Ontario, there is great capacity compared to the number of people that we actually welcome in these institutions. So it's not an issue of capacity, it's an issue of promoting what we can offer to foreign students, Francophones, foreign students. And this is not only the case in Northern Ontario, I think it's the case in all French-speaking communities in Canada, in Quebec, in the regions. We are able to welcome these students, to halt assimilation, and even maybe reverse it. Our institutions, our universities are levers, and we must see them as such. These universities are meant to encourage French students to apply, and these institutions help the demographic, linguistic, and social development of these regions. We must work hand in hand with these institutions, schools, universities, post-secondary education institutions, because these are fundamental institutions like family that help strengthen the capacity of these communities. Bring us students, we are ready to welcome them. If there are no other comments, I would like to ask another question. Students and those wanting to immigrate to Francophone Canada are often from countries that are not very wealthy. There's a housing crisis in this country, rent going for $1,000 to $1,500 a month in certain regions. So how can these immigrants who occupy minimum wage jobs, maybe a little bit over minimum wage, how can they come to Canada and make a living? Integrating someone in Caraquet, Rouyn-Noranda, or elsewhere is cheaper than in Toronto or Ottawa. And that's my answer. Thank you, Mr. Miville. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Mr. Iacono, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to welcome all the witnesses today. Thank you for sharing your observations with us. I have a question for Ms. Duguay-Langlais. Thanks to the IRCC Establishment Fund, there are projects in place. Which projects were developed thanks to this fund? So the IRCC funds, all funding for newcomers is financed by these funds. Francophone communities that welcome these immigrants can also benefit from this funding. I think Heritage also contributes. Refugee welcome programs welcoming refugees are also funded by this fund. There are others that benefit from this funding, but this funding is often based on integration. Integration is well covered by certain of IRCC's programs, but there's also the issue of retention when we're talking about your capacity to work in the Canadian labor market, access to housing, etc. The funds, IRCC's funds that you mention are, yes, well established and work well. Your Francophone Immigration Support Network works with Ottawa Carleton. Could you speak about the program, the welcoming program, and its creation? So Point d'Accueil Francophone, this program, is a new program that we created in Ottawa. It has existed since 2020. This is a hub. It's a hub that welcomes the Francophone immigrant and then redirects this person. And so it's 10 partners working together, school boards, etc. And we welcome this migrant, this student, and we refer them to other services. It's interesting to note that despite less Francophone immigrants coming to Ottawa this year, and despite the pandemic, we met our targets. This can be explained by all the work that we do online, but this program is a great program that works very well. Which services helped Francophone immigrants the most? So there's the CSOC from Carleton. We also offer services, so we welcome them. We draft an integration plan. We assess their qualifications, their needs, what they have to offer, and so we help them set up here in Canada. We also have all these organizations that help with economic integration to help people find a job, to offer training, etc. I have one last question. We spoke of the positive aspects, and now I'd like to know what challenges do they encounter most often? Housing, of course, because even with a job, where they make minimum wage or a little bit more, they are on the poverty line, and so finding housing can be difficult. Integrating these immigrants in jobs is also more difficult, so we need to raise awareness with employers and help them access these employers so that they may find work. Off the top of my head, these are the two main issues. Also, they need to have access to the francophonie. They need to know that we exist. Thank you, Ms. Duguay-Langlais. Thank you for your testimony. It was very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the floor. Mr. Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Recently, an article was published and it spoke about Francophone students in Ontario. There are 2 Francophone colleges that have rejection rates of about 67% for study permits. It's not much better with Francophone universities in this province. I can think of a simple solution. Why not increase the target? Let's take Quebec as an example. Students are admitted into a CEGEP or a university. Quebec has its own targets, and then a large proportion of them are rejected by the federal government. And so I think it would be simple to indicate that you need to accept at the very least 50% of applicants for Francophone countries. What do you think of this, Mr. Miville? Thank you for your question. I think that the federal government should work with Francophone institutions in minority communities and with Quebec institutions to ensure that these students are accepted, and in order to promote the importance of French language communities. It also needs to be widely known that opportunities are more numerous in the regions. Luc Bussière of the Collège La Cité of Ottawa said that we, in general, have to make 20 offers for that 10 students may take us up on these offers, and then a small proportion of those actually get a study permit. So I think that we should increase the target and increase the number of Francophone students that we welcome each year. When I spoke of the gap between the political will and what happens on the ground, there's a lot of work to be done in this gap. Those who accept or give out these study permits are not necessarily aligned with the political will of our politicians. I have a question for Mr. Miville. We've been asking the federal government to support post-secondary Francophone institutions. Do you think that the federal government should give a more stable and more predictable support to post-secondary institutions that offer classes or programs in French? Thank you for your question. I believe that investing in our universities, in our colleges, our French-speaking institutions will provide the best results in the long run.
Français va être le mieux placé.
French will be best placed to ensure success in school and integration, whether it's for Canadian citizens or immigrants. So we need predictable funding. We have to stop funding project by project. We have to work with French language post-secondary education institutions to give them the tools they need to reach our collective objectives. We want to welcome people in the country. We have the capacity to welcome these people, and we need to have the tools we need to ensure these people's success. We want them to want to settle here, to start a family here, to send their kids to our own education systems, and to contribute to the economy. So yes, that's when we have institutions that are by and for, we have better results. Thank you very much. With the few seconds I have left, Mrs. Langlais, what would a francophone immigration policy, what should it look like at the federal government? It's so unfair to have only 15 seconds to answer this. I could tell you that we need collaboration with the provinces. The provinces need to be involved in francophone immigration too, but I have so many more ideas. Thank you very much. This is the end of the round of questions. I would like to first thank you all for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. If there's anything that you didn't have time to talk about, please do not hesitate to send a written response to our clerk. Any information you think we missed out on is vital, and we will take it into consideration as if you had spoken about it today out loud. So if there's anything additional you'd like to tell us, don't hesitate. Mr. Godin is asking about the 14 communities, welcoming communities. Can you tell? This is a program that was announced in the spring 2019, if my memory serves correctly. Could you tell us what that is in writing for the committee? That being said, thank you to our guests. It's so helpful to hear from you. And the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you to the witnesses, and thank you, Mr. Chair.